This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello there and welcome to episode 91 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I hope you enjoyed your break last week if you're listening live as these episodes come out. I was in Japan for a couple of weeks and I came back just a few days ago, and so it was time to have just a week off from the podcast so that I could catch up on life, basically. And in case you're wondering, yes, I had an amazing, incredible, perfect time in Japan. It was so wonderful to return there. I lived in Osaka for a couple of years, but 15 years ago is when I left, so that's quite a while. I've only been back for a very short trip since, and this was the first time I could take my son along. So he's just turned 8, and he was the perfect travel companion. And I'm happy to report that he loves Japan as much as I do. Anyway, there'll be more coming out, more stories from Japan over the coming episodes, I promise you, because I can't stop talking about it and I love it. So don't you worry. But if you do want to catch up on some of the pictures and mini stories from my trip to Japan, and especially to the Osaka, the Kansai region, then do head over to my Facebook page. So facebook.com/notaballerina. And you can scroll through and find heaps and heaps of photos and stuff there from my trip. Now, on to today's episode 91 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast, and it's about something I'm happy I did not have to do in Japan, and that is bargaining and tipping on your travels. This is one of my least favourite things to do, and, you know, I'm here in Australia. I've grown up in Australia where we don't have a tipping culture either, so tipping is hard, and we don't bargain. We just pay what the sign says. So when I travel to places where this is a thing, don't love it very much at all. But anyway, I've talked to a bunch of people today about their experiences with bargaining, and a quick conversation about tipping as well, so we can find out what everyone else thinks. But before we get to that, I have to mention today's sponsor, which is actually my very own travel journal school. So I am reopening traveljournalschool.com shortly. It's a suite of courses that I started off running face-to-face here in Perth. In fact, this year I am running them one more time again. But I have been running them online off and on, and I've got a whole bunch of new stuff coming up. So if you head over to traveljournalschool.com, you can try out my free mini course, which is about one way you can keep a travel journal or diary that you actually want to look back on. You know how you keep a travel diary or you don't even finish it while you're on your trip and then you never open it and blah, blah, blah. So many things wrong, but they can be so amazing and such a great thing to look back on. So head over to traveljournalschool.com. You can sign up for my free mini course, and that will also mean that you'll be alerted when the larger courses open for enrollment. There are new courses coming soon, both for adults and for the first time for kids as well. I've had my own son keeping travel journals of various kinds over the years, and so I've got lots of ideas to help you with your kids and their travel journals when you wander the world. So let's move back into the bargaining and tipping topic. And my first guests are Matt and Marilyn from the Words with Winos podcast, and we started chatting about Southeast Asia and how bargaining is really a pretty standard approach to buying things in many parts of Southeast Asia.
I think out of all the places we traveled to, that's the only places we experienced bargaining and haggling was in Southeast Asia.
And how do you approach it? Have you had any good or bad incidents when you've been bargaining?
Well, when we first got to Southeast Asia and we had a bargain for the first time, I think we were both pretty nervous because, you know, in the West, there's a price and you pay that price and then you go home and everyone's happy. But we were never used to bargaining, so we didn't really know what to do. And I think at first we would just pay the first price they would tell us, and probably got ripped off quite a few times. But then eventually people would tell us, like, no, you have to haggle. Like, that's part of the culture, and it's not like a bad thing by lowering the price. That's what you're meant to do. So at first it was definitely nerve-wracking, like lowering the price. I remember my friends would tell me to say something like really low, and then they would go a little high. They would go much higher than that. Then you kind of try to settle in the middle. And after a few times, you kind of get used to it. And then it becomes kind of like a game, because I remember after we did it a few times and were very nervous, eventually we got pretty confident, and we would just like walk into places and just say the lowest price and be really stern about it. Sometimes we would do it for fun. Like, we wouldn't really, I remember I bought a shirt. I didn't really care too much about the shirt, but I wanted to get the lowest price possible just to see what I can get. And if it wasn't a price that I liked, then I would have just walked away. But it works if you're aggressive and you're really stern and you want a certain price, you can get it.
Yeah, that's impressive. I'm really, really bad at it, but perhaps I've holidayed in these kind of places, but I've never lived there. The only part of Asia I've lived in is Japan, and there's no bargaining there. So I just find it extraordinarily difficult to do. So maybe it's a matter of practice.
Yeah, it's definitely a matter of practice. I mean, I think we both prefer not bargaining, like just having a set price and paying that. It's so much easier, and it really is like, it's something that we're just so not used to that it's difficult. But you're right, if you live in a country long enough, it becomes the way of life, and you just have to get used to it.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier, but that it's part of the culture, is an important part to understand too. Because sometimes when I've been holidaying in those areas, you find yourself kind of arguing over, 20 or 30 cents, and that's nothing to us, and you feel kind of silly having these conversations, and but it's just what's done there. But goodness me, I would just rather the whole world had a price, and here you go, and pay it or not pay it. It's up to you whether you want to pay that price or not. It would be so much easier.
Yep, completely agree.
I think, if I remember rightly, Matt, when we talked last time, we also talked about tipping, because I find tipping very difficult as well. So anything where you don't know for sure what the price is or what money should exchange hands, I just find that so hard.
Yeah, we always look up like the tipping culture before we go places, because I remember in Japan we didn't really look it up, and we were kind of we would tip people, and they would no, they wouldn't take anything from us. And I remember this guy fixed my entire computer for free. He took it apart, put it back together, and like took a completely broken computer and fixed it, like something that would cost hundreds of dollars in the US, and he did it for free, and he wouldn't take any money, and that's just amazing to me.
That sounds very much like Japan to me. That's one of the reasons I love it.
I know.
Yes, I've read, I mean, I've never tried to tip in Japan because I'm not from a tipping culture either, but I've read that they can be quite insulted if you try to tip them, which suits me just fine, because then I don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. It's great.
It's pretty much my favorite thing.
Yeah. Oh no. I just, because my stepdad was American, and when I went to visit my mum and stepdad in America, and he would be all, you have to tip this person and this person and this much to this person. And my mum was still kind of, she'd only lived there for a couple of years, was still kind of confused by it. And I was just baffled, and I was just such a stress for me. So yeah, you have no idea. I found it extraordinarily stressful. I think Matt and Marilyn's approach to bargaining is a very common one. And I think it's common that nobody really, well, maybe not nobody, but very few of us actually really enjoy it. But we did speak briefly about tipping, and I have to tell you, I find that even more stressful. I remember when my mum lived in the US, and of course she is Australian as well, and she was married to an American, and she told me the story of going to get her first haircut in America, and she was just living in a kind of a small town, kind of an hour out of San Diego. And she went off to the hairdresser, came back, and her American husband said to her, well, it came up in conversation, I think, how much did you tip the hairdresser? And my mum was like, oh, you have to tip the hairdresser? And I was equally shocked. I had no idea either. And he said, yes, you better go back. And so she did, I believe, go back to the hairdressers and tip them and apologise and explain it was just that in Australia we didn't do it, because I don't think there was a whole lot of hairdressers around. You don't want to be being at the wrath of these hairdressers who haven't been tipped, apparently. So anyway, things like that I find just so stressful, and I'm happy that in Australia we don't generally tip. I was thinking about, do we ever? Sometimes, you might round things up. But to be honest, now that we pay so much by a credit card or by card in general, we do a lot less of that rounding up. Like before, if I'd, been paying at a restaurant and the bill was, $56, I would have just given them 60 and said, keep the change. But now that I just tap my card, well, I don't really round it up. So I guess there's less tipping than there used to be. But it must be said that, people who work in restaurants are not relying on tips for their income, which I believe is often, part of the problem in countries like the US. Anyway, my next guest today is Clare Harris, who writes great resources for people learning English as their second or later language. And we got talking about an interesting experience she had when she was teaching English in some refugee camps in Thailand.
People who are doing that kind of work, like refugees teaching each other or working in the sanitation or working for UNHCR, would get, I think it was 10 baht a day. And sometimes students would be so grateful when they were leaving to go to a third country, that they would want to take you out for a cool drink. I won't mention the brand. And the cool drink at that time was 5 baht. And so it's always that kind of dilemma that you have when you're working with people who don't have much, but who want to treat you.
Yes, and it's important to them to feel like they can...
It's sort of like, again, this thing of dignity for people to feel that they can...
Thank you properly.
Thank you properly. I mean, that's an issue when you travel too, isn't it, in areas that are very less resourced, less developed than we're used to feel like, how do you respond to people who want to be welcoming and hospitable when that
they can't afford to in a way that
but they do.
Want to,
and here's someone buying me a cool drink, which is, when we both have one, is a day's pay for them.
Yes. Oh, gosh, it's hard, isn't it?
Very interesting kind of a dilemma, you
know?
Yeah,
that's right.
Because
it's also very kind of... it's culturally kind of insulting to turn them down.
Yes, of course.
But you don't...
And look, if someone wants to do it, I think maybe you have to...
allow them and...
say, acknowledge their desire to say thank you.
Yes.
For something they've received. Don't we all want to say thank you for what,
of course, yes,
what we've received?
Exactly.
Anyway, that was a bit of a distraction.
A nice distraction. It's hard, isn't it? I mean, I've talked to a couple of people about the topic of bargaining and haggling and stuff when you're in countries where that's common, and that whole dilemma of you don't want to enable a society where they charge 20 times too much.
Yes, to everybody who's clearly from outside, but at the same time...
I don't want to haggle over something that's 10 cents to me, and
yes,
it's so hard to know
just how to...
balance that.
Yes.
And I hate bargaining. I would rather just pay the first amount straight up.
Me too. I love those fixed price. Yes. I'll go in there.
I would rather pay more. I just find it so awkward and so uncomfortable. I can't even negotiate, like in Australia, if there's any kind of situation where you need to negotiate a price.
Yes.
I don't know, if you're selling something on Gumtree or something. I just can't do it. I hate it.
Yes. So. And yet for so many people, that's just an automatic part of...
Yes. It's the culture and
of daily life.
Yeah.
Like, how could you possibly just accept the first price?
Yes, exactly. No, I do love a good sign that says, this is the price, let's stick with that. Yes, it's hard, isn't it? I completely agree with Claire. I love fixed price shops too, wherever I am in the world. And I would just rather pay a reasonable fixed price than deal with the bargaining. But anyway, it's not always possible. Now, my final guest today is Luke Mackin of Wild Sumatra, and he has, a similar opinion to me, but much more, much more well thought out. So Luke lives and has lived for some years now in rural Indonesia. So he's much more aware of kind of the reality of life for people who are, really living in quite dire or difficult financial circumstances anyway. I mean, compared to us with our complete and utter privilege. So, I really enjoyed talking to Luke about this topic and his opinions about haggling and bargaining.
I don't want to bargain. Like, I've given up bargaining. I feel just seeing how how on the razor's edge so many people are here. It just feels unethical for me to try to get, the lowest price. Some people are, like, on these blogs and whatnot, people are like, oh yeah, it's a game. But for the person on the other side, it's not really a game. Like, it's one thing if it's like local to local, like that's fine. That's a normal dynamic. But we're so much more privileged. I don't care what kind of budget you're traveling on. You're a backpacker going a year on the road, whatever. Everyone's traveling with a budget. But that's an extreme luxury to be able to travel. For so many reasons. And I feel like, for me personally, it's my conviction that I won't bargain anymore. I will. It's one thing, or at least I won't try to, like, get the lowest price possible. If they tell me, like, it costs this much and it's, like, completely outrageous, like, I wouldn't even pay that in the States, then okay, I might try to bring that price down. But if it's like, yeah, I might pay that in the States, and I actually want that thing, then that's it. I'll just pay for it, whatever it is. Maybe I overpay by a couple dollars or whatever. Just seeing the reality for people on this side of it, if I, especially, I guess, this, such a push for, like, fair trade coffee and things like that. And even that is just so unfair. Even, like, the best, like, fair trade is incredibly unjust. It's even if you pay them a living wage, quote unquote, like, they still don't have good access to healthcare, or education, or choice. I feel like so much of poverty is about choice. You don't have, you can't make it, what you're going to be when you get older, or what your kids can do and stuff is just so limited by poverty. So that's just my personal feeling about that. I remember these traveling around once. I saw these backpackers from, I don't know where they're from, some European country, and they're just, like, squabbling with this driver about over, like, 10 cents, you know?
That's
and it's
the
like
thing.
and the price he was quoting them was like the normal price. Like, I'd been living there for a little while.
So
like,
they weren't being ripped off horribly or anything. Yeah, not at all. And the amount that they're squabbling over just seemed like, really, dude? Like, yeah. Think
maybe
about it in your currency, and it's nothing.
Like, think about it. Yeah, it's nothing. And it's like, you can bless this person, maybe they can buy an extra treat for their kid, or, something. Yeah. To
them, it will be way more valuable than to you.
Right.
So, and for me, I mean, I'm exactly the same as you. I have never enjoyed any of that haggling or bargaining at all. Because it just doesn't sit right with me. I'm not a good negotiator in any situation. Like, it's just not my strength, because I just don't like to kind of be controversial about things like that. Or, I don't want to kind of create bad feeling. And so I hate any of those situations. And so I usually just pay what they ask, as long as, like you say, I know that they haven't just, inflated it like 100 times or something, just to see if they can trick a foreigner or something like that. But as long as it's anywhere vaguely reasonable, then I just don't care. I would rather just pay. And if you think about it afterward, it might have been 50 cents or $1 or something that would be the difference if you negotiated it. And, like, yes, I don't travel on a big budget, but 50 cents or $1 is going to be much more useful to them than it is to me. So,
and
I agree with you completely.
Pay extra, like 50 cents extra for, like, coffee in the States, like a fair trade coffee in the States. Like, why wouldn't I be willing to give that money directly to the person, rather than,
definitely
like,
going to use it themselves. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I know, like, face to face, I am helping this person. Not helping, but, just being more just. Like, this world is just so corrupt and unjust. Completely. And so, like, if I can pay a more fair wage to somebody, like, that seems, why not? And and even just the whole idea, like, people get so upset, like, oh, they're ripping me off, or they find out they paid for something, they find out later that it, the regular price, quote unquote, the local price was, $2 cheap. Oh, they ripped me off. It's like, they didn't rip you off. You agreed on the price for one. But also, like, how can you, how much are we constantly ripping off like the rural poor, or those in another country.
Absolutely.
Like the price of this T-shirt in the States or in Australia, compared to like how much the workers are being paid to make it. Like that is just so unfair.
Yes.
And you can say, oh, standard of living is lower, cheaper and stuff. But no, these people, they still don't have good access to healthcare, quality healthcare, education, and choice. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if you can try to not be as much a part of that system, although it's just inherently everywhere.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But yes, it's a very hard problem to solve. But at least, and I just feel like it creates a bit more good feeling. And I don't know. I just find if I've ever been in those situations where I've bargained, I just walk away feeling a bit miserable about it. So,
I agree. I think that's our conscience. Like, there's something wrong about this.
It's just not pleasant. And I'm traveling somewhere exciting and interesting, and I'm so privileged to be able to travel. The people that you're bargaining with have probably, never traveled far beyond where they were born a lot of the time, and might feel they never will be able to. And here you are in a foreign country. It just seems to me like it just doesn't add up to me to get upset about that kind of stuff. So
exactly.
Yeah, no, I'm totally on your side there. Plus, I'm terrible at negotiating, so it's even better if I could just have another good reason not to do it. So.
Yeah. But, I'm doing it for ethical reasons. But
Yes. I will just say it's 100% ethical reasons, not also 10% that I'm a terrible bargainer. I really appreciated Luke's thoughts, and I suspect that if all of us were living in the kind of place where Luke lives, we might all come around to have a much more similar opinion to him and give up the bargaining completely. So I do think that I'm going to just use that as my excuse for not bargaining. It's completely just for ethical reasons because I'm so bad at it. Anyway, that is all I have for you today for episode 91 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. But of course, it's not all, because here's the important bits. Here's how you can go and find out more about all of my wonderful guests. First up, of course, my sponsor today is a part of me, is traveljournalschool.com. So do head over to traveljournalschool.com if you're curious about improving the way you keep memories about your trips. We talk about all kinds of things, so the new courses are not only going to be writing, but also various digital ways that you can keep a record of your travels. So traveljournalschool.com it is. And my first guest today, that was Marilyn and Matt from Words with Winos. So just a lovely podcast. You can look them up wherever you find your podcasts. Just search for Words with Winos, or you can go to wordswithwinos.com. I always enjoy listening to what they have to say. After Marilyn and Matt, I chatted with Clare Harris, and you can find her at clareharris.com, where she has a blog called Englishy Things, and she also has a website at thebooknextdoor.com, which has Australian ESL materials for adults and young adults. So if you happen to be an ESL teacher, especially in Australia, of course, then Clare's stuff is going to be really useful for you. And finally, I chatted with the delightful Luke Mackin of Wild Sumatra, so you can head to his site at wildsumatra.com. Even if you just go for the photos there, you will be very, very happy you went. Now, if you have an opinion about bargaining or haggling, or an interesting story to tell, then hop over to our Facebook group. It's growing by the day. It's such a lovely group of people. Thank you everyone who's joined. And you can find it just by searching for Thoughtful Travellers on Facebook, or head to the link in the show notes. You can find that link and everything else I've talked about in the show notes. And for this episode, they will be at notaballerina.com/91. Thank you so much again for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.